Hey guys, welcome and thank you for joining us under the lantern. My name is Asher,
My
and I'm
name's
joined here
Clay.
by
My name's
yes.
Clay.
Okay, we get it. And let's just get straight into things. Let's
Yeah,
just get things going.
I was about to say, I know we've been excited all week about this. We've been talking about this. I mean, pretty much every time you and me have messaged or called this week. I guess I say that. I haven't really called you this week. That's weird. Like, I typically call you at least once through the week.
Yeah, bro, I'm mad at you for that. No, I'm just kidding.
But we've been messaging back and forth, really trying to get into this and start off with a proper first episode. I know, last week we posted a kind of introduction just to let you know who we are, what the purpose of this is, kind of the founding of everything, and that general mission statement. And just wanted to jump in here this first conversation. I honestly, I know the quote that hit me the most from that introduction. I keep going back to it is feeling like somebody shot the First Amendment last week. Like it's nuts to me. The one person that was willing to sit down and have a conversation is gone now. And
Yeah, I mean, honestly, last week, in my opinion, was a pretty dark week all around the spectrum because there's a lot that actually happened. If you just scope out so much, kind of just one thing to another to another. But I mean, obviously, highlight being, it's one of those like it's I guess it's a little tough to process because I mean, you never expect certain things, like you're traveling through life, you're traversing in your normal day to day life, and then you're just hit with something that you don't really expect. And I mean, that can be pretty much anything, right? Like getting laid off work, getting into a car accident, just anything you don't expect it, but it can alter your life drastically. And I mean, for some people, I mean, it may not, and that's their own, I guess, opinion, and we can dive into I guess some of the controversy a little bit later, but for most people that were, I guess, really good followers of Charlie Kirk or, believed in similar ideologies as him, or maybe not any of that, but at least saw some of his content. It's one of those like you don't really know what to do with yourself because you expect like, oh, for example for me, like I'll scroll through Instagram reels whenever I feel bored or whatever, and something that I saw prominently was a lot of his posts and a lot of the reels about, him just going to these campuses or going to these public events and just talking to people, debating, answering questions, asking questions, things like that. And it's like, it you don't really you don't realize the impact that somebody has until they're gone. And I don't personally don't think there has been a bigger exemplification of that than this very moment.
no, and that's what I was gonna say that too. With did you see out of Colorado State University? I think it was Wednesday. Uh, Charlie Kirk was supposed to go there next in his tour. He was leaving UVU, and I'm sure going home to Arizona. I about said Chicago. It's where he grew up, but he was going to go back home for a little bit, and then he was going to be stopping in Colorado. And there was a lot of question about, okay, what do we do now? He was supposed to be here. Crowd still showed up, and they held a vigil out on the football field. To your point of like things just happen and you don't expect it, but for that to be the response, everybody's phones have been filled with videos and clips and remembrances of him, and to still have those moments of, hey, he was supposed to be here. Let's still get together and have that moment together, to have the conversation, be around each other, and still kind of foster that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be a lot of what we see, at least majority of the rest of the year.
Yeah,
Just
because
because, I mean, it's going to take some time to kind of, I guess, figure out how to move forward. Because I mean,
exactly. It,
obviously it's it was a big all of a sudden shocker, and so it's not like there's going to be something in play as a contingency or anything like that. Like this was something that was unexpected entirely. So I think at least for the time being, that would probably be the best way to celebrate an event like that because I mean he was pretty much the face of college debate in our current time.
oh yeah,
Like
he
anytime you think about like debating somebody on something, like he was the number one person you would think about because I mean it's like he's challenging the youth ideology and it's not in a malice or negative way. It helps people get their brains grinding a bit, thinking about things that impact the entire world essentially. So it's like, how do
yeah
you follow up with that?
he was the one that wasn't afraid to go sit down and say, hey, let's have a conversation about it. And he was all for that true, honest debate of just tell me why you believe this. Tell me what led you to that point, and wanted to sit there and have those conversations. And I know the ones that always went viral were the ones where it was just people coming up and being mean and being a dick to him and different things like that. But it was always the conversation that really led that movement of tell me why you believe this. Let me tell you why I believe against it. You tell me why you believe against my point, and we'll just work back and forth on this. And
And I think one thing, one thing that I've seen people try and argue, and I honestly don't understand this argument, is that his views were very negative, or he was against this or he was against that. It's not that he was against it or anything like that. It was more so he wanted to see anybody's viewpoint on it and to challenge it in a way to where they would then understand that there are differences in opinions, even if your opinion, what you think is firm with you, it didn't really matter necessarily to him. I mean, obviously he's the kind of person that like he wants to kind of help guide you to understanding the truth, right? Understanding that these are the facts. This is how everything is. But at the end of the day, he's not gonna treat you any differently because of the way that you think. But also,
no,
he's going to try and get to a point where he understands where you're coming from, as long as you show him the same respect and courtesy to understand where he's coming from. And that's the kind of thing that in today's world and today's society, like you don't see a lot of.
no, that was his biggest thing. And it's the thing that I continue to see that's always been called out about the way he debated was he would go into something and he'd say, okay, what's your stance on this? Everybody would get out their initial points and he would take a step back and say, okay, can we agree on this fundamental point A? Can we agree on this fundamental point B? And he would continue to work down the line until you had the branch on the issue. So he could always step back and say, hey, at least we agree to this point. So we have a mutual respect there. We just disagree on this top part of the issue. No matter how small that not minor, but how small that lower layer of an issue may be that you agree on, you could find some point. And you would see after those debates, he would even say, hey man, respect it. You had the guts to come up here and talk. You had the guts to be open and honest and upfront about everything. So that takes guts. I give you some respect. Let's take a picture. You want a hat? Just something to say, I appreciate you stepping forward.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, I mean, I've seen a lot. I've been my feed has been loaded with a lot of his debates and a lot of his reels and things, and it's interesting. What's interesting to me is I've seen a lot of that specific moment where he has that breakdown of like, well, help, look, wait, let's talk about this. Okay, well, we agree on this at least, and stuff like that, and you can see the other person's perspective kind of shift slightly to where they realize that, hey, you know what? Maybe our opinions are the same. We just had a different viewpoint going into it, but now it's like, okay, well, now we're getting somewhere, like now we can come to a level where we both agree that this is something that needs to happen, or this is something that needs to change, or this is an opinion that we both share. And you can kind of see that playing out. And that's exactly the reason why, you know, these debates exist. That's why these
Well,
debates existed
and it's what
back in
debate
the
should
day.
be. I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, it should be something where you say, hey, if we agree at this point, let's find the solution that makes us both happy there so we can solve issue 1, 2, 3. And then let's talk about 4, 5, and 6 because at least 1, 2, and 3 are taken care of. That's what
I
debate's
mean,
supposed to be.
yeah. And I mean, like, if you look at the history of our country, right? Like, the foundational factor was debates, right? Because you had people that had views, that had visions for this country, but then you had others that opposed those views or challenged those issues and challenged those opinions that they had. And that's why we are the country that we are today, because we're filled with a diverse range of mindsets and viewpoints. But then the question kind of comes to of like, if we all have these differences in opinions, how do you convey those opinions in a productive and, I guess, efficient enough environment to where we can get a collective of everything, a little bit of everything, combine it together to create the best outcome for our future? And I mean, that is the basis of a debate, right? Like, that is the fundamental foundation of this country, and that's the premise of why we deliberate and talk about things the way that we do and the way that we did back in the past, where we challenged ideas. Because at the end of the day, no one single idea is pitch perfect, right? There's flaws, there's things that are not, fully put together, and it takes a group of people to see those flaws, to see those imperfections, and try and make everything flush out, and like kind of be, the best version of that one thing that it can be, right? Like, think of it as a group project
Oh,
where,
yeah.
you have like, um maybe your skills are like better, you have different set of skills that are better than my set of skills, right? So say we're doing the same exact project, and it's a solo project, right? Your outcome is going to be different than my outcome, but we're working for the same kind of outcome on our own. But imagine if we collaborated, right? We could improve that outcome that much more because you have a different set of skills than I do versus the next guy versus somebody else. It's a collective of the good that combines into creating the great.
No, and that's what one
And
of my favorite quotes, and it kind of gets into everything feels tribal nowadays in the way that things are talked about in the world. But Thunder Ranch, hilarious dude. I think he's passed now. I think he was a lifelong smoker, so it would not surprise me if he has. I remember somebody saying it, but he said that, at the end of the day, if you treat everything like a company, then you've got, you know, Democrats are the ones that are going to care about people. They're the ones that are going to figure out how to make everyone happy. And Republicans are going to be the one to figure out how to afford it. You need both sides and everything because, to your point, a group project, we're going to have different outcomes at the end of the day on the pieces we're working on, but it's taking those pieces together that truly create the full image.
Yeah, and that's I think that's something that as a society right now we lack. We don't have that, I guess, collective cooperation to create something that is better. Right now we're in this separated mindset where, you think your your opinion is better. I think my opinion is better. The other person thinks that, and that's kind of how we break everything down rather than building it back up. Is when we can't come together and resolve these differences in a collective, in a more professional manner, in a more cooperative and cohabitating way, to where we can coexist with different opinions, but at the end of the day, come to a similar conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, I've been more politically active in it, and I know you're getting more into it, so I don't know if you've had the same thing, but after the election last year, I had so many people block me and remove me from everything, and I'm like, why? Why can't we still have a conversation at the end of the day? We're not coming together anymore and saying, even beside our differences, we can still be friends. We can still. There was a guy I used to work with, 2019? And we stayed in good contact and everything, especially once kind of lockdowns ended there at the end of 2020. We'd meet once or twice a year and go get a couple beers. There was a place that we used to go to that did like a trivia night, and we would meet up for that and, kind of thing. And then the election happened 2 days later. I realized I didn't have him on Snapchat anymore. And I was like, well, what happened? Like, is my Snapchat acting up? And realized it was on everything. He had blocked me from everything because he knew I voted for Trump. And I was like, how do we get anywhere with that? How can we have an open conversation? Because I was about to say our good friend, but I know you and him have your differences, Tyler. And that's what our conversations turned into, I would say probably about 2016, after Trump's first election, with just talking about politics. And even at the end of the day, like, I knew he was a very left side of the aisle Democrat. I wouldn't say leftist because he doesn't go that far. Same way that I would say I'm on the right, but I'm nowhere close to the extreme side of the right. We were still able to talk and have a conversation and say, hey, what do you think about this going on in the world? What would you do different? What is your viewpoint? And not just, you're stupid, you're a bad person, I don't know how you could believe this way. It was just, explain it to me. And we had those back and forths, really productive back and forths, to the point that he even told me one time, he was like, hey, I honestly think I could vote for Trump if I could get around this, this, and this. I can't remember the specifics of what was still holding him back. In the same vein that after Biden was elected, I talked with him a little bit, and I was like, I can see why you voted for him, and I can see the unity that he speaks of, and I hope that's what happened. Now, it's not, but, at the end of the day, we still had that conversation. And so I want to get back into more of that, being able to have a constructive difference and say, I believe this, I believe that, you believe this, you believe that. And a worst case scenario, at the end of the day, we walk away saying we disagree, but we still go get a beer because we still both enjoy football. We both still enjoy trivia. We still both enjoy whatever it is, just looking at trees, being able to say we have our differences, but let's be open about those differences and not self-censor ourselves.
Yeah. Uh, I, I don't know if you remember this. This was what, if back. I think we were like fifth grade, maybe. Um, this was around. I'm probably gonna date both of us here. Um, Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama,
Yeah, that would have been fifth grade.
and
Oh,
and um, in there was, I don't know. I think it was just the one time, but I think at least in our class, um, the teacher was like, okay, we're getting to a point where we're growing a little older. We need to kind of understand certain things of the world, and obviously this was part of the history lesson that we were learning. She was like, okay, so we have two, potential presidential candidates. Geez, Mitt Romney, Barack Obama. She laid out a few viewpoints that both parties had, and then said, okay, let's see who is swaying Mitt Romney's side, and then people raise their hand. And who is swaying Obama's side? People raise their hand, and then they were like, okay, well, why do you guys think that? And then you'd have, a few people in the class debating one side or the other, right? Fast forward to today. Now, I don't know what the educational curriculum is. I doubt they'll have those kinds of conversations at fifth grade level anymore, but I don't know, and I doubt that they even have conversations like that anymore because the environment around politics is become so toxic
Yeah.
that if you share a certain viewpoint, if it doesn't align with somebody else's viewpoint, you're essentially putting a target on your own back. And it's so dumb that we've gotten to a point like that because, you know, First Amendment right, which has been the biggest talk over the past couple of weeks now since this whole situation. But even more than that, it's been the talk for years now just because of everything that's been going on, that it's become to a point where that that amendment is kind of slowly being filtered away in a sense because people have to some degree watch what they're saying or else there are dire consequences to it. And I mean, it's crazy to me that we've gotten to a point where if somebody has an opinion that isn't aligned with another person's opinion, then the other person gets outraged, gets very, affected by it negatively, gets very frustrated and angry about it. But if the tables are turned, that same person that would get angry about a difference in opinions would then say, well, I mean, I have my First Amendment right for freedom of speech. Like, why can't I, I should be able to say what I want to say. And it's become such a hypocritical society today because, the freedom of speech is only existent if opinions are the same. And that's not what the First Amendment is. The First Amendment is you have the ability to express your opinions and talk about what you believe without having to worry about, you know, any negativity surrounding that because essentially you have the right to talk, right? Like it's
Yeah.
basically like, somebody putting a muffle on your mouth. Like they're basically preventing you from speaking your mind. And I mean, I'll agree certain things shouldn't necessarily be said, but at the same time, to what point are we going to be filtered? To what point are we going to be, limited on what we can say and what we can't say?
I've always said there's things, I think you even heard me say this growing up, of there's things you shouldn't say, but you have the right to say them. It just lets the rest of us know you're stupid, at least. Like, I say that not in the political side, but in someone being
Just in
racist or
general.
bigoted or, yeah, something in general. Like, you shouldn't be racist. You shouldn't be bigoted. You shouldn't say these things. But you should have the right to say it, and it lets the rest of us know where your mindset is on those issues. But more and more you see, and I can tell by the way you're saying it, you're starting to notice it where you have shifted a little more right of the aisle. And I can tell you, being a pretty strong conservative in my mature life, I wouldn't say adult because kind of 13, 14, I started to realize I was more on that traditional conservative side of everything. And I remember going to college, and it's kind of my version of your fifth grade story of, I got on campus and this girl walked up to me and was like, "Hey, are you registered to vote?" And I was like, "No, not really, but why are you talking to me? I don't know you." And she started to register me to vote, and she was like, "Oh, by the way, you should vote for Bernie," because this would have been 2016. And I was like, well, I kind of like the free college thing. That sounds good to me, but I don't know how he's going to afford it. And if she could have, she would have taken the clipboard out of my hand because she realized I was saying I was going to vote for Trump. And I remember having that kind of back and forth. And I was like, okay, I've always been conservative and I want to be able to talk about that. I want to talk about it with my friends and I want to talk about it in my community. And I can remember walking around campus feeling like I needed to put a muzzle on because every time I spoke up on those more traditional conservative values, I was always met with an opposition of, how could you be so hateful? How could you be so bigoted? And it got to the point that I felt like my mouth was shut. I couldn't say anything. And you reach to that point of, how can I be myself in anything if I can't truly express myself? We hear that all the time in the trans conversation and the LGBTQ space of, this is your identity, this is who you are, be proud and loud about it. Why does that not get applied to every facet of what makes us who we are? When you're shut down and because you're not the red jersey or the blue jersey, because it happens on both sides. I don't mean to keep going back to the left and a Democrat side of is always the side that shuts you down, because you see it on both. I've seen just as many on the right of, well, you're having this conversation, it's not true, we should still hear them out. But we need to find that balance of, let's have a conversation but not be so mean to each other, to kind of put it in layman terms. I don't know a better way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that I've slowly kind of come to realize is, I mean, hypocrisy, I think, definitely is on both sides, right? Like, one side says something but doesn't apply that to themselves. And I think one thing that, we as people need to understand and realize is that if we're going to have a certain standard for somebody else, we have to have that same standard for ourselves, right? That's something that I've kind of grown to, I guess, accept for myself, right? Like, for example, if I'm going out in public, right? I'm not going to talk to somebody in a certain way if I don't expect that same exact form of speech coming back at my direction. And so, like, if I'm ever out in public or if I'm ever, like, talking to somebody, I approach them as kindly as I can, because at the end of the day, that exemplifies that I am trying to approach you in a kind, respectful manner, and I expect the same exact thing being reciprocated back to me. Now, obviously, if is that the case, I mean, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, right? Sometimes you'll be approached very rudely or in a very agitated way by somebody else, but at the end of the day, right, like, even if that other person isn't reciprocating it, you should never lower your standards and, fall, in my eyes, fall to a similar low level. And I'm not saying that to be negative about anything or to be in, like, I guess, a negative manner towards anybody, but that's just kind of how, in my eyes, everybody needs to kind of hold themselves accountable, right? It's not a, oh, you have this very specific opinion. That's the only thing I'm judging you on, and that's the only thing that makes me think your character is bad, right?
Yeah.
It's a, well, okay, this person may have this one opinion, But all around, like this guy seems like a very good guy, or girl seems like a very good girl, or person, individual, whoever it is, they seem like they're a decent human being to where I can still have a well thought out and fruitful conversation about anything to that person. And I think in today's world, like it's become a lot more negative just in the approach alone, let alone a conversation that, you walk up to somebody, um, maybe you're like in a line or something and the guy's on, person's like on their phone or something, and then they call, next person in line, that person's next, you tap on their shoulder or something. And then you're like, hey, to call the next person, that person starts being rude at you, right? Like, or opposite spectrum, that person's like, oh, I'm sorry, whatever, and then they keep going. It's one of those, like, the very first thing that you say to somebody is going to be the thing that leaves an impression, right? It's a marker for your personality, for your character, and for who you are in that person's mind. So you don't want the very first interaction or thing that somebody has with you to be negative, because then it leaves that negative taste, that negative flavor in their mouth forever, and it just tarnishes your image in their eyes. And as a society, I think we need to all kind of come to an understanding that if we aren't willing to be treated that way, then we shouldn't treat other people that way.
Yeah, no, and it's kind of taking it back to what you'd started on with that, with the respect side. I think you and me specifically may have came into the world kind of in a rose-tinted glasses kind of sense, because it's part of our mission statement. I mean, you and me are not opposite ends of the spectrum, because we grew up, went to school together in walking distance to hang out. And but I never saw you as different as we were, in that I had the respect that you were different in the ways that I was different. I'd come to your house. It's in our mission statement that we're, two different faiths. I never understood what was going on. I guess I understood after you explained it, because I did end up asking you questions about it, but I didn't understand the things, like if I was spending the night, the different things that you would do for your faith. But I still sat and respected. It was interesting to me to see what that different side of the world was, and have that moment to go, okay, we're different. We believe differently. We have different things. But I can take this moment to sit respectfully, to understand not just you as a person, but you as my friend, you as another human being, what your different views were. And, in that, as different as our views may be, we still came back to the same point of me being a Christian and you being a Hindu, of our faith was based around respect one another, love one another, only put good into the world, and understand that love comes from something bigger than us. And so I've had that thought kind of more recently in the last couple years of, did we come into the world with that because you did the same thing? If we got out of school early and went and got food and went to the park, you respected that I wanted to pray before my meal. And it brings me back to another story that I can remember, because it was you, me, and Jamie, and we went to the park, and we had sat down and we had gotten some food and we were just going to hang out. And some guy came up and wanted to start something about, like, I don't know how you can bow your head as a Christian because I had a cross on. And knowing that the guy sitting across from you is praying to a different God. And I was like, man, I don't care. We're respecting each other. He knows he can ask me questions about what I'm doing. I've asked him questions and I know I can about what he's doing. Shouldn't that be the main thing that matters here? And just going back to that kind of full circle to what you were saying, we need to get back to a place of respect for our common man. That we believe different, that we have different views on things. But can't we just respect each other, listen to each other, and maybe see the world differently?
Yeah, I mean, like, I mean, going back to, the fact that sure, we're different, right? Like me and you are different people, but at the end of the day, we are people. We are humans. We are beings on this earth that should all have the same constitutional rights as human beings, right? And sure, like, my beliefs and values may be different from your beliefs or your values, but at the end of the day, we're all people. And, you know just as much as me, like, I didn't have like the craziest, childhood growing up. Like, I had my fair share of stuff that I was going throughout elementary school, high school, even a little bit through college, even. And it's one of those, like, it during tough situations, it's always hard to kind of comprehend why people do certain things, right? Because for you, maybe you're different than the person that's sitting across from you. But at the end of the day, at least in my perspective, I never really saw differences because at the end of the day, I understood that I'm a person, I bleed, I feel things, I have thoughts and opinions. The other person is a being that bleeds, that has opinions and thoughts. So why would it constitute me to go over that person and say, "Hey, why are you the way that you are?" Instead, it should be like, "Hey, I've noticed you do this. Can you explain it to me?" Like obviously I don't understand it, and maybe, learning why somebody does something else, why somebody does something different will give you the understanding of why they do it, right? And maybe even help you kind of rethink certain things that you might do because then you realize, hey, maybe that's actually something that I, benefit from doing. Like, for example, you know, a lot of people do, like meditation, stuff like that, right? And for them, it gives them that peace of mind. It allows them to be calm and allows them to kind of detox from any negativity that they have throughout the day.
I was about to say one of those kind
Many,
of like before we get too far from it, it is the greatest thing I've added to my day. Do you meditate? I don't think I've ever asked you.
I mean, I don't do it on a regular basis, though I should. I don't regularly do it, but it is something that I've done many times before. I do whenever I have the ability to do it, I guess. But um,
I've tried to
like
start
something like
taking
that, like,
like 10 to 15 minutes a day to just sit, just white noise and some earbuds. It's a beautiful thing, not to get off track. But
oh
it
yeah, I
just
mean,
made me laugh that you said it. I was like, man, it has been a fantastic thing for my mental health.
yeah, I mean, well, that's my point, right? Like, some people don't do it, and they're like, why am I gonna just sit there for a few minutes and absolutely do nothing? But if you see somebody out there meditating or see somebody out there sitting just kind of silently and just having, like, in their own thoughts, instead of saying, bro, this guy is kind of, a weirdo, he just sits there and just does nothing for like time here and there, walk up to that person and be like, hey, what are you doing? Like, everything okay? Like, are you, just sitting here meditating or whatever? And then they say yes. And then you ask them, like, okay, what got you into doing it? Does it actually help? Try and figure out why the person does it, and then you'll come to understand that, hey, this person sees it's a good relief for them. Maybe I should try it. If you actually implement it, you realize that it's working for you. That's something that you never knew you needed until you saw somebody else doing it. And that's just one example of many different things, but it goes a long way to just walk up to somebody and say, hey, you're different in these ways. I saw you do something that I've never seen or done myself. what is it all about? How has it helped you, or why do you do it? And it'll, if nothing else, it at least gives you that understanding, gives you the knowledge of why somebody may do it. That way, the next time you come across it, you're not just like, oh, that's weird. Like you're doing something that I don't do, like that. Instead of backing away from it and judging a person, you realize that that's something that they do to help them in whatever it is that they're trying to do, and maybe it could help you one day, right? Like that's the whole premise of debating. That's the whole premise of talking, having a conversation with somebody, is you're not doing it because you don't agree with them and you want to prove your point. It's because you don't agree with them, but you're trying to understand why they do it, where they're coming from, how it helps them, or why they have the opinions or the thoughts or anything that they have, because maybe in their viewpoint, from their perspective, that's what they think is the right. And if you don't have a conversation about it, you're never going to find out.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it kind of leads back to everything that's been happening, kind of coming full circle with. I feel like when you shut down things, it's the famous quote from Charlie. It's the one that's been going around the most of when you stop talking, bad things happen. When we stop seeking to understand our fellow man, we hear so much about, we can't allow extremism to take the void. We can't allow extremism to work its way in because then we hate each other. And we saw that in its most extreme form of somebody hating someone so much they went to the extreme values of, because I disagree, this person needs to not exist. And I think that's what we face now, of when we stop talking to each other, we allow a space for that extremism to get in of, we all stop talking because, whoa, that was crazy. But then the only thing that comes in is those loudest voices that this doesn't stop. The ones that think this is okay. The ones that think these actions are the acceptable ones. You start having those moments where it works its way in, and we lead to more instances like Charlie Kirk. I know there was one this past week. I need to do better about, if I'm going to start bringing these things up through the week, I need to write down where they're from. But there was a DA somewhere, I can't remember, that had some death threats come through, and a cop stopped someone coming through that had a loaded rifle and loaded magazines that was inspired by everything that happened on September 10th, and was ready to kill this DA because they disagreed. I don't understand how we can allow that to fill the void versus, like we've been saying this whole time, of let's find an understanding, even on a basic sense of, I'm human, you're human, I bleed, you bleed, I need to eat just as much as you, I need to sleep just as much as you. Finding that common ground to say, I disagree with you, but we're both human, so please continue to be you. Let's just figure out the difference and where we can agree enough to exist happily, to exist healthily.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's been a lot that happened last week, from obviously the assassination, then there was the Colorado school shooting, and then the incident at that one motel. I
Yeah,
honestly don't even know how to discuss that one as much because of how horrifying that was.
I was about to say,
But
I pulled that
it's
one up because I was like, I knew we were going to talk about it because it was on September 10th as well. I mean, it seems like this opened the floodgate of some of the worst shit we've ever seen.
well, there's three tragic things that happened that day, right? There's the assassination, and then the Colorado school shooting, right? Like it's at one point, does it become enough for us to kind of come together as a collective community and realize that maybe instead of acting in this way, coming together, talking it out, and trying to figure out the differences is the way to go. Because, I mean, if you look at it, right, a lot of times violence starts because of differences in viewpoints and differences in opinions. But what people don't realize is there is the simplest solution to that, and that is coming together and discussing it, talking about it, letting it out, and then coming to a middle ground and understanding that regardless of the fact that you have a different viewpoint, regardless of the fact that somebody doesn't agree with you, it shouldn't mean that there has to be a loss of life somewhere because of that. It shouldn't come to a point where we result to a degraded form of ourselves and become essentially maniacal.
Yeah, I
And
mean, it comes,
it's horrifying.
yeah, it comes back around to, you kind of dated us on being in fifth grade when Obama was elected. We were too young to have memories of 9/11. We remembered the 24th anniversary of that last week as well. And while we don't remember it, I know I've heard from my family and friends that were old enough to remember it. That was one of those moments that was bad enough as a collective. The American people came together and said, that's enough. And we're all Americans. We all have things going on, but we need to be there for one another. We don't need to get to such an extreme event again to reach that point to say, my neighbor is just as human as me. To have that moment of collectiveness to come together. How bad does the world have to get before we do that again? Because honestly, it's already scary. Just even from my perspective on it, that is terrifying that what we've gone through so far still hasn't been enough to say, whoa, let's crank it back a couple notches.
And I mean, honestly, I mean, obviously you've seen, most everybody's seen it, but the truly terrifying part is the way people react to all of this online, right? You know, obviously after Charlie Kirk's assassination, you have a varying perspective, a varying reaction from people, and you have the people that are mourning his loss. You have the people that are very devastated, the fact that somebody very prominent in society just got assassinated in front of the entire world. But then you have the other side of things where people are actively going online and celebrating the fact that a human life was lost because they didn't agree with that person. And I mean, at the end of the day, yes, we have a First Amendment right to freedom of speech. I'm not saying that that's, by any which way, shape, or form, something that we need to obviously filter out. But at the end of the day, sure, because of the First Amendment right, you have the freedom to say whatever you want. So you may not obviously get the legal actions of certain things that you say or whatever it is, but it defines your character. And what people fail to understand, and I've been seeing a lot of these people that went online publicly celebrating, all this stuff. They're, getting laid off, getting fired from their jobs. They are losing friends and family over it, and it's tough for me to kind of, I guess it's tough for me in two different ways. The first way, it's tough for me to comprehend that people can celebrate a human life being lost, regardless of who that person was, what their beliefs are, anything like that. It's hard for me to understand how people can turn something like that into a quote unquote celebration of sorts. But another thing that is very challenging for me to see is, because of that one wrong decision that somebody made, their entire life gets kind of crumbled, right? And I'm not saying that, you know, these people, I'm not saying that they did, and I'm not saying that they didn't deserve to, lose their job, lose their friends, lose their family, anything like that. Because at the end of the day, that's not something that I'm going to agree or disagree on, right? Certain people, if you behave a certain way, then at the end of the day, whatever ends up happening to you is going to happen based off of the actions that you have taken, right? Based off of the things that you do in the moment. And a lot of the times, some of these people, they may have posted this stuff because they were happy about it and they didn't know how to express their feeling. And I'm not saying you don't have a right to the opinion, but at the end of the day, it's not so much of that opinion, it's about the action, right? You can have your opinion, you didn't like him, okay, that's I mean, you don't I'm not going to respect you necessarily for saying that he deserved to die or anything like that, but at the end of the day, you have your opinions. But instead of pulling out your phone, recording a video and saying, "Hey, I'm glad that that happened," or whatever the situation is, and then posting it for the entire world to see, a split second reconsideration would go a really long way. Because at the end of the day, by doing that, you're exemplifying the kind of person that you are. And that's a lot of what I'm seeing online is a good bit of something crazy that I saw was a good bit of teachers did that, right? Like a good bit of teachers went online and celebrated his assassination, Charlie Kirk's assassination, publicly. And it's one of those, again, you have the freedom of an opinion. That's your right. You have the freedom of speech. That is also your right. But just know that at the end of the day, we live in a world where characterization is primarily through the impression that you leave on somebody. And regardless of, First Amendment, that's the thing that you need to kind of understand is in a situation like this, right? Somebody dies. Somebody's lost their life. A human life is tragically taken. And it defines your humanity in the moment. It defines whether you have the right morals or not. And it's really unsettling to know the extent of the amount of people that are rooting, not only celebrating but rooting for more of this kind of terrifying, terrible tragedy. Like I've seen so many people going online and saying, we need more of this. Oh, who's next? Pick somebody else. Do something. Like, at what point are we going to realize that killing people is not the answer? Like that's not human nature. That's otherworldly in my opinion.
Yeah, I know that was one of my first reactions with it all is how can another human being see that loss of life, regardless of any of the other circumstances of his wife and his kids and anything else going on in that regard, which still horrible, not to minimize it, but just the public loss of life, somebody dying at the hands of somebody else in an aggravated sense of murder like that, how can you ever see that and your first reaction be, as you said, pulling your phone out, recording a video, and posting for the world to see of you saying he deserved it? You're glad he's gone. Because,
Eh,
and you saw what I would call a normal reaction from a human being is just, I didn't know him or I didn't agree with him, but that was awful. I hope his family's okay. Just full stop. That's it. If you have to post something, to your point, take a half second more to think it through and just, if that's all you've got to say is good, just don't. I mean, I can't imagine saying that about anyone. Even the people that I would consider ones that I will never find a common ground understanding with. I would never be like, oh yeah, great. It's wild to me. It's wild that that is a reaction.
but now that's the problem, is that that's the reality. And the only way to change that reality is to change our own perspectives. And I'm not saying individually our own perspectives. Everybody has to come to a common ground and say, hey, you know what? That's not something that we as humans need to have, is a reaction so negative that it dehumanizes us. And like, obviously, like, I have my fair share of differences with other people as well, as you know more well than anybody else. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to be the one to say, hey, this person needs to just not exist. That's not something that I honestly believe in, regardless if that person may have done wrong to me or may have had different opinions or views or whatever have you, right? At the end of the day, it's still a person. You know, Charlie Kirk was still a person. He was a father, he was a husband, he was a son, he's a friend. To say that he deserved it is just completely and entirely unethical to say. Because at the end of the day, now you have two young children, like so young that they're going to have their entire life not be with their father. A wife that's going to spend the rest of her years essentially mourning somebody that she thought she was going to spend the rest of her life with. Parents that thought, you know, my son is going to do great things after my passing. Like, it's something that people don't understand because they aren't at a certain level yet, right? Or maybe they just don't have the capability of understanding that we're all the same, regardless of what we look like, regardless of what we think, what we believe, how we act. We are all the same. To say that about somebody else essentially is like saying that about yourself.
Yeah, I think still one of the most chilling things that I've seen is, you had that initial report of his wife and children were there and that his daughter was running to him in that moment when the gunshot went through because she heard the sound and was scared and knew her father was going to protect her, to keep her safe. And then coupled that with, after kind of that initial service of getting him home to Arizona, and yeah, she's talked about in her statements that she left her kids at home because I think they're 3 and 1? Yeah, they were 3 and 1 years
Yeah.
old, and they're not going to understand death. They're not going to understand what's going on. So she left them at home. She went to all the initial meetings and everything. And when she got home, her daughter ran up and was like, I missed you today. Here's what I did today. Where's dad? That was one of her first questions. And she said the only response she had for her was, well, dad's on a work trip with Jesus to be able to afford your blueberries. That breaks my heart that she is already thinking about the absence of her father, that he was that present as much as we saw him every day on a college campus or on his podcast or things like that, but he was still a present enough father that his daughter missed him after 48 hours of him not being around. And the only response is just, he's got somewhere he's got to be. And it might be a while until you see him again.
I mean, it's like how do you explain to somebody that young that they're not going to see their father anymore?
You
Like
can't.
it's something that nobody really understands because again, nobody, and by nobody I mean like people of our age, younger, or anything like that. Nobody has the ability to comprehend that because none of us are in that position. And the sad truth is that there's no possible way to break something like that to a child because at the end of the day, they are so young they don't understand it, and so it just makes you kind of realize the extent of the problem that we have is on the one hand, yeah, you have like the typical response of people either mourning or giving their respects. But then on the other hand, people that are like outright celebrating it, saying that it was, it's just very despicable to say the least. Because at the end of the day, like another human being was taken. Imagine that being somebody that you cared about. Imagine that being somebody that was your friend and somebody else said that exact same thing to you. How would you feel? Right?
Yeah,
You're
I
not going to
mean,
feel very pleased by it. You're not going to feel great about it. Why do you expect somebody else to feel the same way
and
that you're
that's,
feeling now?
I keep seeing the both sides when it's talked about, you know, any news channel at this point. You see how, well, both sides need to tone down the rhetoric and things like that, but you apply that in the same sense if this had been, I can't think of a personality that would have leaned more left in the same situation. But if it had been the same way around, that would be the mindset I would try to put myself in of we can't fathom that. And even after it has happened, we're still in that moment of did that happen? Did this go on? Because it's beyond any scope that I think a rational person would be able to say, yeah, okay, that's possible. I didn't think it was possible.
I mean, it's one of those like I've been seeing shorts of a lot of people kind of just talking about the situation, right? And I mean, one of the one of the biggest things that I've been seeing that's been going around is when Charlie Kirk passed, right? People held vigils all around the world, right? I mean, talking about the U.S., right? Every college campus, if not every, most college campuses had vigils. Even public places had vigils for them, and you know, across a country, London, the UK, even South Korea, like all these places were doing the same thing. Spain, I believe, did it. Like, there's all these places that had these like vigils and things like that. Now, if you rewind, right now, again, mind you, Charlie Kirk was well known, right? He was a very big political advocate for the conservatives, and so obviously his name was all over. Everybody knew him. Even if you may not have known him, you heard of him. Even if you didn't even hear of him, at some point you would have heard of him.
I was about to say it didn't matter where you consumed anything. If you were present at all in the American political system, even just being around while it was happening, you've heard him in the background. You've seen his face. Like you said, even if you hadn't sought him out, you still knew, like, okay, he's a conservative. He's on this side. These are some of his views. And
Yeah, like he's a very very big prominent figure in today's society, right? Now, rewind the clock, go back to 2020, right? Now, again, this was another horrible thing. It shouldn't have happened, and again exemplifies the loss of life regardless of any situation, any circumstance. George Floyd lost his life, right? And the way that it happened obviously was horrific as well. It's something that shouldn't have happened. It's something that, you know, needed to needed to be corrected in some way, shape, or form. But George Floyd was an ordinary person. He was denounced to nobody. Nobody really knew him in that grandeur fashion. Yet, were people holding vigils for him? Were people, crowding the streets mourning his death? No. People were out rioting. People were destroying restaurants, stores. They were looting stores, properties, places. And even now, like, fast forward a few months ago, right? ICE raids. People are on the streets destroying property because that's how you get your point across. Like, that's not how you get your point across. That's how you show the world that you're not a civilized human being.
no, and that's in that same thing. I actually saw something that came out today. I think it was on the 18th. Illinois State Senator Karina Villa was walking through neighborhoods while ICE was going through and was shouting to stay in your homes and everything like that. Even on that small degree of a scale, it's not a small thing anymore. When have you ever thought about your senator just walking through your neighborhood because the police are there and saying, hey, I know things are happening here. I know the laws are being broken, but stay in your homes because they don't have a right to come into your home. It's only when you're out in your yard. To keep people from facing the law, facing what's going on. It's
It, it's just like there's so much that in my opinion needs to change. And it's not a one side or anything. I've seen people saying that it's not a two-sided thing, it's a one-sided thing. To some degree, yes. One side may or may not be more extreme than the other. But at the end of the day, it's a collective responsibility because this country is currently divided into two separate sections
mhm.
because of pure political viewpoints and opinions. And
You've got the
we
red
can't
jersey and the
hold
blue jersey. There's no other way to really put it.
and you can't hold one side accountable because at the end of the day, the side that is being held accountable is always going to come out and say this is oppression because of our beliefs. This is oppression. And you know, if the problem is one-sided or not, regardless, we are one people. We are one nation. We are a country that is united under the American flag. We need to act civilized because of that, right? Our forefathers of this country did not establish this country and say in the future we are going to be divided again. They established this country because they wanted us to be united under the one rule that is the United States of America, right? We are one nation under God. We say that pledge every single day in school.
And
But
we also were
currently we're not
taught that
living by
it's,
that.
as I say, we were also taught that it's all about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That we're given these rights by something greater than us. Even stepping away from our faith, trying to found it in something other than just that we're founded under a God that creates that higher moral order. Just in general, as humans, we should have those basic rights to pursue what makes us happy, pursue what makes life worth it, and pursuing the freedom through liberty to do that. And we're not doing that anymore. We're not pushing forward in a world where you can feel free to find what makes you happy and life worth living. We're going towards you're either on this side or this side, and if you're on the other side, you're wrong. And it just doesn't lead to a country. It doesn't lead to a country that values that search for happiness. We're just living in a world where we're supposed to be depressed day after day, grind day after day, because there's nothing worth fighting for anymore. I fully believe there is something worth fighting for still. We wouldn't be here talking now for an hour and 12 minutes at this point. But there's something worth fighting for.
And I think one thing that we need to realize, or at least one thing that we need to figure out as a collective, is what is it that we're fighting for, right? Like why is it that people are saying, oh, I don't want to stay in America anymore, yet they continue to stay? Why do you continue to stay? Figure that out. And then realize that at the end of the day, we are still one nation. We've just lost the number one thing that unites us, and that is conversation.
I couldn't
Talking
have
to
said
somebody, understanding where they're coming from, realizing that they may have different views than you do, instead of just challenging those views, ask questions as to why those views exist for that person. Maybe you might realize that people have different perspectives, and we need to respect those perspectives because that's how the person sees the world. Instead of saying, you don't believe what I believe, so you're wrong, say, you don't believe what I believe. Why is that? What is your reasoning for your belief? Hear them out. Give them your viewpoint and your belief on that viewpoint. And then understand that at the end of the day, we may differ in opinions, but we are still one people.
absolutely. And that's what, thinking about it too, we've been going for a little over an hour. We can start calling it here. I know we were trying to play with the format, going back and forth, just kind of the real talk. Because the only reason is we're back on kind of that opening topic. It's one of those. Let us know if you want longer, shorter, something like that. I honestly, until I looked down for that comment of how long we'd been going, I didn't realize we'd been going for an hour.
Yeah, I mean, conversation's good. Conversation's juicy, man.
Yeah, conversation's great over here under this lantern.
Yeah,
I
getting all that light.
I kind of like the way we've got some bullet points on some things, and one of the things that I do like about the bullet points is there's a final question. I could see that being kind of our closing with it kind of after saying all of this that we need to talk to everybody and we need to be open to conversation. It's a good question because I know I've got an answer for it. Is there anyone you avoid talking to?
I mean, is that a direct question for me?
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, I will say there are people that I don't talk to, but it's not necessarily avoidance, more so just no, not really had an opportunity to speak to. Um, and I mean, like sometimes I will say I do choose to avoid certain people for certain reasons, but at the end of the day, you know, those people are not going to understand those reasons until you approach them and talk to them. And I mean, again, conversation is what leads to conclusions. So at the end of the day, I know I need to at least communicate with people that I may or may not speak with and at least justify the reasonings. Maybe they'll understand, maybe they won't, but at the end of the day, it's my responsibility to at least make it known that way a solution can be had between that.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of similar to my question. The only thing that I can think of somebody that I avoid talking to, and this is a very Gen Z thing, I avoid talking to like checkout clerks. Like now that we've got a, not to turn it into a joke, but like now that we've got self checkout on everything, I hate going through a checkout where I've got to like put everything up there and wait for somebody else to scan everything. I'm like, I want to go into the store, I want to get what I need, scan my stuff, and leave. That is the
I,
only.
I wouldn't I wouldn't say I avoid them purposefully. I say for me, I just find it more convenient to check everything out on my own just because I know I have three or four things. I don't want to go wait in a line with a clerk to do it. Yeah, there are lines of self-checkout, but there are more self-checkouts than there are clerks nowadays. So why not just go there in about a few seconds? There's one that opens up, walk in, scan my thing. If I have an issue, I'll just call up the attendant and tell them to, hey, something happened. They'll come in, they'll scan their badge, do whatever they need to do. They'll go back to their post. I'll finish my checkout and then walk out the door. And I mean, I make it a point. Um, there's if you go to like Walmart and a few other stores do it. I think Target does it as well. But there will be people standing by the doors checking receipts, and I understand their pain. I've done that myself, but um, you know, uh, I won't make it a point to like walk up and say, "Hey, how's your day going?" But I'll at least say, "Well, thank you," or "Have a good day," because at the end of the day, initiating something as minute as that can have a grand effect, right? Maybe that person, they're checking receipts and they get mouthed off by people. And trust me, that happens quite a lot.
Oh
And
yeah.
they're frustrated because they have to stand by the door for hours at a time, staring at people's receipts and then hearing it from people as to why they're so frustrated on why you're checking their receipts. It's at least nice to hear somebody walk by and say, "You know what, have a good day," you, or just say, bye, or like, acknowledging that they're there and leaving them with at least something that's positive so that their day is not as bad as it could be.
Yeah, no, and that's
And
what, like I said, it's not even that I avoid them. It's just that, like, man, I just want to take my, like you said, 3 or 4 items and get out because I go to the store like every day at this point. Like, I just buy things as I need them the day I need them. Rather than, I can remember growing up, like, we had one Walmart trip a month, and that was where you went and, like, got everything you knew you were going to need for the month. And I just can't do it personally. But no,
yeah,
yeah, like you're saying, I don't avoid them. You have the ones that now stand in self checkout. I guess, like you were saying, the ones that have their badge if something goes wrong, or the security purpose that they do serve of, like, if someone's standing right there, you're less likely to try to, like, sneak a thing of bananas into your bag. And
yeah,
like you said, hey, how's your day going? Hey, thank you for, thank you. You just kind of that common courtesy of, like, you're doing a job, you're helping me out in some sense.
yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, I know I
I
speak
would say
for. Hmm?
I would say one thing. Okay. Um, I know we have a question here, but I don't really like that question. So for everybody that might be listening, um, if we'll do this like I guess every episode we release, but we'll have a question that we encourage people to comment on. Um, and I guess I'm still thinking of a question, but do you
Yeah, I
have a
was.
question in mind?
No, I kind of did the same thing, actually. It's funny that you and me are on the same page, that I was looking at that question and I was like, it doesn't fit the direction that this went. Because I know when we were getting notes together and everything like that, what we had titled this was the death of conversation. And we kind of went more the route of less death of conversation and more the route of, we need more conversation. We need to claim conversation back and that responsibility to talk to each other. I guess the question I
Yes.
would have. Wait, it sounded like you had one.
Well, I guess my question more so is, what was the most recent positive conversation you've had with any human being, and how did that conversation go?
Again, funny we are on the
Because
same page because that was what I was going to be. What was the last conversation, even if you disagreed, just a good conversation you had with somebody? What was it about? How did it come about? Why did the conversation stir to begin with?
and if it was a disagreement, did you come to a conclusion and a middle ground?
Absolutely. Well, I know I speak for both Asher and I on, hey, we appreciate you joining us here under the lantern. I, we're glad to have you. We welcome you back. Looks like we've got a pretty good cadence of once a week. I say that after two. I know there's going to be instances where we can't, but hopefully we can do this once a week, as often as we can. And we hope you stick around to join us again.
Yep. I mean, who knows? Maybe we may have additional people join in and give their thoughts and opinions.
Yeah, always welcome to it. Well, with that, we will see you next time. Remember, if anything touched you here, leave us a like, leave us a comment on that conversation, as well as a comment on anything that you'd want us to try in the future. And just follow us for that journey.
And remember, there's always a place for us. There's always a place for you with us under the lantern.